Hello students, welcome to the another video of refraction of light at plane surface. So our today's lesson is factors affecting the angle of deviation. So in our last class we already discussed that there are four factors on which the angle of deviation is dependent. So here in this class I will discuss particularly one factor which is very important for the syllabus and for the exam: dependence of angle of deviation on the angle of incidence. And there is a graph between I and delta, that means angle of incidence and angle of deviation. So students, let's start. So students, here the dependence of angle of deviation on the angle of incidence, which is shown by the I delta graph, and it is experimentally observed that as the angle of incidence increases, the angle of deviation first decreases and reaches to minimum value, and then for a certain angle of incidence, and then on further increasing of angle of incidence, the angle of deviation begins to increase. So you can, the statement you can relate with this graph also, ki the angle of deviation first decrease when the angle of incidence is increases, the angle of deviation first decrease, then its minimum at a certain value of angle of incidence, this is the value, and then again further increasing the angle of incidence, the angle of deviation begins to increase. So here how we can get the graph. To get the graph showing the variation of angle of deviation with the angle of incidence, experimentally the direction of incident ray is kept unchanged and the prism is rotated. Okay, and on the rotation of prism, the direction of normal at the face of prism changes, so the angle which the incident ray makes with the normal, that means the angle of incidence, changes. So the angle of deviation delta, here the delta angle of deviation is in the y-axis, and angle of incidence which is indicating by small I is placed in x-axis. And the graph is I versus delta, and the graph show that the variation in angle of deviation with the angle of incidence, this is called the I delta graph. And here the minimum value of angle of deviation, okay, is marked by delta mean. Okay, that means the minimum angle of deviation, and it is found that the angle of deviation becomes minimum when the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of emergence. How? Acha, in the previous class we already showed the delta is actually, delta is equal to I1 plus I2 minus A. Okay, so if I1 is equal to, you can show that if I1 is equal to I2, that means I, so you can see that ki I plus I minus A, that means 2I minus A, this is the delta minimum. That means at that point the delta is equal to 2I minus A. Okay, so the position of prism with respect to the incident ray at which the incident ray suffers minimum deviation is called the position of minimum deviation, and thus in this position of minimum deviation the refracted ray inside the prism is parallel to its base. Okay, so here you can see that the position of the minimum deviation, the refracted ray inside the prism, here inside the prism the refracted ray inside the prism is parallel to its base if the prism is equilateral, or the principal section of the prism forms an isolysis triangle. In this what you can say that ki delta is equal to, delta minimum is equal to I1 plus I2 minus A, that means I plus I, if you consider that I1 is equal to I2, so this is the expression of minimum angle of deviation. So here the deviation at different angles of incidence. Suppose to say here figure 4.25 is the deviation by a equilateral prism. So figure 4.25 shows the deviation of a light ray by an equilateral prism of glass. We all know that the refractive index of the glass is 1.5. Sorry, the values of different angles can be calculated using the equations. So where are the equations? The equations are, so these are the three equations. The first is sin I by sin r is equal to mu, r1 plus r2 is equal to a, and I1 plus I2 is equal to a plus delta. About this equation I already discussed in our previous videos. So suppose to say the angle of prism 60 degree, and in the figure 4.25a, for this figure angle of incidence is 70 degree, angle of emergence is 33 degree, and angle of deviation is 43 degree. In the figure B, I1, that means angle of incidence is 48 degree, angle of emergence is 48 degree same, and deviation is 36 degree, while in figure C the I1 is 30 degree, I2 is 77 degree, and delta is 47 degree. Yes, so all of you can easily identify that delta has the minimum value in figure B, 4.25b, when the angle of incidence is 48 degree and the refracted ray, which is PQ, is parallel to the base of the prism BC, and in this condition the angle of emergence is also 48 degree, equal to the angle of incidence. So in this figure the delta minimum will be 36 degree. Let me show you. So all of you can easily get the calculation. This is key delta minimum in figure B. The 2i minus a is the value of angle of deviation, minimum angle of deviation, and here angle of incidence is 48 degree, a is 60 degree, so delta mean will be 36 degree. So this is the factor on which the angle of deviation is dependent. So this is the first factor, and the rest three factors I will discuss in our next video. So that's it for today's video, guys. I hope all of you understand very well. So please subscribe our channel. Thank you.